Well, welcome back to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marcy Nettles and I am your host. So you're probably wondering, it's like your blank what now? Well, guys, what this is all about is it's having people share their stories where they had the opportunity to go through really difficult times to where they could have just given up and stopped. They chose to push through, because if we can show you enough stories, eventually you'll see yourself in one of them and you'll see that you can make it through too. So I am so excited about this episode because this one is very personal and very close to my heart because of who I get to interview today. This person actually came into my life when I was just a young girl. I was not even 10 years old, I don't think, when I first met JT. And then we got really close because our mothers became very close and they both went through separations in their families and they decided to rely on each other and move in together because my mother had a daycare and his mother was working with my mom. And so to support each other and to support their children the very best way that they could, they combined their mothering and their abilities to just make people feel well accepted and help to thrive together in the same home. And so JT Hawker was actually like my younger brother I never had, because I have 4 older brothers, but I never had a younger brother because he's just barely younger than I am. But we grew up in the same household throughout like the junior high and high school years. And, so we've been through a lot together, but through life circumstances and the way things happen, we actually got separated and we hadn't seen each other for a really long time. As a matter of fact, oh my gosh, it was 30 years before social media, and we believe God, brought us back together just recently. So JT, oh my gosh, welcome back. Welcome back into my life. Welcome back to making me, smile. But I know that there has been a lot that's happened in the past 30 years in your life. And so I would really like to just kind of know and have you share with us, what have you been up to prior to, now before I finish that question, the title of JT's episode. This is a really big one, guys. And I think that it's going to resonate with many people on one level or another. But his title of his episode is Your Pain Meds Have Taken Over Your Life. What now? So JT, what were you up to before the pain meds came into the situation, came into your life? What had you been doing?
I was up to living large, and thank you for having me, first of all. And I love how you talk about us as in our childhood,
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm happy to be here. So prior to my addiction to pain pills, I was living a pretty good life. I had gotten married to the love of my life. We had 3 children we were raising. I had an amazing job. I was working in the communications field. And just, I don't know, I was just being father. Like, that was my role. That was what I felt like I was born to do. I took the kids, we took them to Disneyland and Mexico and, Oregon. We just did everything with our kids and camping. Like, I was just really wrapped up in them, the football games, the soccer games, coaching t-ball, all that father stuff that, I kind of missed him being young, but, that's what I was doing, making pretty good money and living in a nice home, a pretty big home. And Marcy, I think it was just pretty normal life, as a family, raising a family.
Right. The American dream, right? Being able to provide, being able to spend the time with your kids the way that you wanted to, doing all the things that you wanted to do, in a body that was providing you the ability to do it as well. Yeah. But then you got injured. How did you get injured? And then it kind of really shifted everything.
Right. Well, it really wasn't so much an injury as it was like a slow progressing pain in my back. And around the age of 36, it just got to the point where I was really uncomfortable all the time. And I was at a desk job sitting 8 hours a day, and I couldn't lay down. Like I was just in a lot of pain. Um, so come to find out later on that it was degenerative disc disease, which slowly eats away your vertebrae. So, but it took 6 years to get that diagnosis.
Wow. Wow. So in the time frame of when it first really started and it became kind of debilitating, but it took 6 years for a doctor to figure out what was going on, how were you coping with the pain? I mean, how did you deal with that? Because I've had back pain and I've had debilitating back pain for a very, a long time in my life as well. And so I understand what it feels like. How were you living with the back pain?
Well, I wasn't, and it got to the point where I don't know, pain can really cause mental like distress. And I was to the point where I just felt like I wanted to die because I just could not enjoy any moment. A doctor finally put me on pain medication. They started me out on hydrocodones and Percocets. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. I can actually function as a person. I can actually go play with my kids. I don't have this ache that's just gnawing at my back all the time. And so to me, and it almost woke up something else in my brain. It was like the way I felt was like it was something that I had been missing my whole life that made me happy. Like I was happy, but it really like just made me really happy. And maybe part of that was the pain going away, but I also think that I know the drug also did that. So for that 6 years, yeah, it was a mess. Because it didn't take me long, like 2 or 3 months, to really start abusing them because they weren't working at the level that they had when I first took them. So I was just taking more and more and running out. And when I would run out, I would get extremely sick. I would be in withdrawal, which I didn't even know what withdrawal was. The doctors never said to me, okay, this is what could possibly happen if you take these. This was at the height of the opioid crisis when doctors were just handing this stuff out and being told that it was non-addictive. And I guess my insurance wasn't that great. And so I felt like they were just shuffling me around from doctor to specialist. Every one of them would just hand a script and be like, well, we don't know what's wrong. They would do x-rays, but no MRIs. And,
Because your insurance wouldn't cover it. So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they're not going to do
exactly.
something that they're not going to get paid for. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, yeah,
It's all
it's
about
an
money.
unfortunate. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Marcy, it just got bad. Sorry if I'm stuttering, but my family was noticing the difference in me because like my son said on my podcast the other day, I just wasn't that father that was playing with them. I wasn't that father that was making it to their games or even just engaging in their life. Years went by, Marcy, those years went by that I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just grew up and I was absent for all of that. Eventually, within those 6 years, when I would run out of my pills and get sick, and all that cycle would just happen over and over again. I was introduced to another drug. I don't know if you want me to mention on here or not. But
Well, before we move into the progression, when
right.
you were on the prescription medication, did you
Mhm.
realize that you were addicted? Did you realize that? Did you really identify this as being, oh my gosh, I can't live without these, or I am so stuck on these pills, I've got a problem? Did you ever realize that?
I did realize, that I couldn't function without him. And a lot of that was the pain, of course, that would come back, and it would come back worse than it was before, because the pain pills masked it for so long that it
Right.
felt extremely um, painful. But
Mhm.
yeah, I had an idea. I was like, okay, something's up. I didn't know what withdrawal was, but I'm like, something's up. Every time I run out of these, I'm getting really, really sick. I'm throwing up. I can't get out of bed, for like 2 or 3 days. I'm sweating.
Mhm.
Um, I know that seems naive, but I just didn't have any idea. As a kid, I watched my mother go through something kind of similar, but I was too young to understand what it was. I mean, I know now, but I don't know. I veered off track there,
No,
Marcy.
no, you're absolutely okay, because this is all part of the story, and I completely understand, to a degree, not as far as you went into this, but I've been on those medications, and I know how they make you feel and what it does to your brain. And you, at times, you may even be thinking something that you think is correct and true, but in all reality, it is not, right? And
Yeah,
so you had already mentioned that when you first using the pain medication, that these pills, it's like it would last you for a certain amount of time. And in the beginning, you felt great, but then it stopped working the same way. And so you'd increase the amount that you were
yeah,
taking.
yeah,
And so you were mentioning another drug that you went to, and that is just really, unfortunately, when these pain medications are divvied out the way that they are, and they are not, education is not given along with the prescriptions. They are just, here, take these.
yeah.
And I think nowadays they're a little bit better at
It's
saying, hey,
different.
you shouldn't
Yeah,
continue on these for very long, because if
right.
you're on them a certain amount of time, this can become really detrimental to
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and your whole life. So absolutely, share with us that progression and what happened, once you got to the point where the pain pills just weren't cutting it.
Well, first of all, I can say that, like you said, it changes the chemistry and the thinking of the brain. Like you think something is correct, it's not correct. That was happening a lot. My morals were getting shady, but I thought that that was okay. Little things like taking something from a store seemed like that was okay. It belonged to me. I kind of fell into this darker hole. And it was a slow progression, as my son said. It was a slow progression. It wasn't. You would have had to been on the outside looking in to see it. Um, but I got to the point where I wasn't talking. My husband and I were not talking. We were fighting all the time. He didn't want to be home, because he didn't know what he was going to come home to. One day he'd come home and I would be up and I'd be happy and everything would be great. And then the next day he might come home and I'm doing really odd things, just like, man, I don't know. I've got some examples, but I would say, like, when my son brought his girlfriend, which is his wife now, over to the house, he went to introduce me. I came out of the room midday in a pair of Superman underwear, and that was it. And I acted like it was perfectly normal. I'm shaking her hand and be like, "Oh, welcome," and just thinking that kind of stuff. It just got bizarre. I would be up in the middle of the night. Um, I set our stove on fire one time because I was cooking nothing that was in the pan. Frozen pizza in a pot, um, spaghetti noodles in the oven. I mean, it was just it was I mean, it was just causing me to behave, and I thought that was normal. I thought it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever have times to where you, just reality was not real. You had psychosis.
Mm.
You thought that different things were going on, or you were having conversations, or because I know, and part of this that I'm asking is from your podcast, because I listened to the podcast with your boys, and that was just
Mm.
amazing. It was so heartwarming for me to hear you be able to have these conversations with them now.
Yeah.
And yet I can only imagine what it was like for them
Yeah.
back in those times. I mean, can you describe it all? I mean, because in all reality, you had no idea what it was like for them back then, because you were
Yeah.
so caught up
Yeah.
in your circumstances and the drugs and what it was doing to you, that
Right.
you didn't realize what was going on with your boys.
No, and like I said, my morals, I felt like I was Superman dad. And it was, my mind just didn't care about them anymore. It didn't care what they were doing. I justified it in my head to saying things like, well, I had kids so young, and they're halfway raised, and it's time for me. It all just became about me. And and the psychosis that came after I started using. I was introduced to methamphetamines by somebody who was supposed to be taking me to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting.
Oh no.
To help me. But I'm not blaming her, because I make my own choices. But that was it. Like I had a little bit of that, and that was, my pain was gone again. My energy was back. I started getting more involved with the kids. It was like I kind of came back a little bit. And what turned out to be just like doing it when I ran out of my pills, to like every weekend, to then like every single day. And I knew at that point I was an addict, because I knew what those drugs did to people. But Marcy, I just didn't care.
Right.
And I watched, my boys, and my youngest son is still in a lot of pain. He's 25 years old now, but I will make that amends when he's ready. He's not ready yet. But I missed out on, like, when he was, this is hard, Marcy.
It's okay, buddy.
When he was 10 and I was on opioids, it was when I was doing both. I couldn't handle him anymore. I didn't want to handle him. I didn't want him. And the thing about these pills and shifting your mind is, I called my ex-wife and I said, he's got to move in with you. He had known nothing but me and Travis his whole life since he was just a kid. And I couldn't wait for her to drive up from Pocatello, and I was loading his stuff in as fast as I could. It was like, now I really am free, because my two older boys in high school, and they're never home anyway. Now I can do everything I want to do without looking at my consequences.
Mm-hmm. Basically your conscience in human form.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things with addiction, and especially when you move it from pain pills into methamphetamine, that's an instant addiction right there. You
Yeah.
use and you're addicted. And it becomes all about where your next high is coming from. And so it's very understandable that you would have that difficulty with your morals and your integrity, because if all you're thinking about is, where's my next high coming from? And this is an illegal drug, right? This is something that you can't just go and buy at the store.
No.
And so you have this whole, you have a whole separate personality, having to be able to support this new addiction as well. So,
it became, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It became a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. Like, the job was to get the next high. If I had to drive across all the way across town, if I had to drive to another city, if I had to steal money, if I had to, I pawned off my kids' video games and their consoles. Um, Anything that they had of any value, I took to the pawn shop because I wasn't working. I couldn't hold down a job, and I'd worked my whole life. And there was no way, like, I would start a job, I'd get up on those methamphetamines and I would start a job. It would last 2 or 3 days before, like, I just couldn't, it was taking up too much of my time where I needed to be hunting for the next high.
Right.
It was a living nightmare. It was, it's a trap. Drugs are a trap. And, even the prescription pills have that same kind of power, because there was a time when I was trying to buy those on the streets, before I was introduced to methamphetamines. They already had control of my life, unable to work. Like, they'd already done that job, but the methamphetamines just made it. And actually, those are easier to get. Methamphetamines are easier to get than prescription pills.
Yeah.
At the time, I would doctor shop, I would do all that stuff, but yeah, I mean, I can't quite remember your question.
No, you're okay. Let's just go on to kind of a progressive question here then. With your progression now, I mean, you've gone from pain pills to methamphetamine, and you get to the point to where you are out of control in every aspect. And generally, when you combine being out of control and drugs like this, it leads to overdoses. And I know that you had some scares.
Yeah.
Would you share it all about the overdose scares that you had during this period?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one was, I was probably about 3 or 4 years in deep, to just the pills alone. And I took a lot and I bought a lot. And Marcy, to be honest with you, I wanted it to end. I felt like I was never going to be able to get out of this. I didn't know how. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have somebody saying, hey, this is what I did. Like, I just didn't have that. And I remember one night, I had done so much, and then I took a whole bunch of, I took a few Ambien, and I was just, because I was up and I was trying to sleep, and I went completely out of my mind. Scared Travis to death. I scared my husband to death because of the way I was acting. Come downstairs screaming and yelling at nobody that was there, having conversations on my phone where nobody was on the other line. He called my mother. My mother came over and scared her to death, and it takes a lot to scare my mom.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And she called an ambulance. Well, she called the cops is what she did, but it ended up being a fire truck and an ambulance and cop cars, and the whole neighborhood is there watching. And I'm getting gurneyed out of the house. And, when I went to the hospital, I don't really remember much of it other than the next day, they said I was lucky to be alive with the amount of pills I had in my system. And not only that, but mixing with, I was shoving Tylenol, any pill I could find in the house, because I was out of my mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, they said I was very lucky to live. And that was just the first of many, many, many hospital visits.
Wow.
They sent me to, they did a 5150, which is code for, he needs to go into some sort of treatment, because he's a little out of his mind. They put me on a 72-hour hold and put me in, it's a rehab, but it's a state-run one. So
it's like a psych evaluation.
Yeah. But there are a lot of people with addiction issues there. I think it was like, quote unquote, a rehab. And that was my first experience with the rehab, and it was terrible. There was people there off the streets, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, they're human beings as well, and they're trying the best they can. But at the time, that's not what my thinking was. So you'll have to understand when I say like, this person or that person, like I was still very judgmental. I didn't feel like I belonged to, I was better than everybody else in there because I had a home and I had a car and I had, you know, kids and I had things. So I was better than. And so yeah, this guy in the middle of the night, this homeless guy, I woke up in the middle of the night and he was peeing on my bed. And yeah, it mortified me. And so I called Travis that next morning. My 72-hour hold was over, but he wanted me to stay the full 30-day program. And I was like, you need to come get me now. And I was yelling and screaming. And he did, he didn't know. He didn't know he was enabling me. He thought maybe that scare was going to be the scare that ended the cycle. And I did go, I was introduced to NA while I was in there, Narcotics Anonymous, which I had never had any sort of contact with. I didn't know what the program was about. I always looked down on people who were in AA and NA as, drunks and junkies. But I was only pills, so I'm better than.
Right, right. Oh gosh.
Because I didn't know there's no difference. I managed to continue going to NA meetings after that for approximately 60 days. I got my 60-day chip and I took my kids there, took Travis there. I wanted to show them how great I am and that I'm better. And now you can trust me again. And, after 5 or 6 years, after 5 or 6 years of putting them through hell and then being like, I'm cured. And that's in my mind, I thought I was. I was missing what the connection truly was. And I relapsed very shortly after I got that chip because I was like, okay, now they think I'm cool again. So I'm just going to sneak a little here and there. And
yeah. And that doesn't work.
No.
So how many times did you go to either Narcotics Anonymous or eventually you got to Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Yeah.
So how many times did you try programs?
I have been in and out of the room for 12 years now. I gave it a shot. Like a real pretty mediocre effort, I would say now. At the time I thought was a really good effort. After my first rehab that I did stay 30 days in, after my second rehab that I did stay 30 days in, and that's when, because here's the thing, Marcy, what those pills, what those drugs make you think is that your way is a better way. I mean, I literally thought that I could rewrite the Bible. That's how important, how smart those pills made me feel, that intelligent. And that I was going to rewrite the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous because I didn't like the word God in there. And I wasn't going to have that. No way. You're not in this, not church. I was still very angry at God. I did, the religion I grew up in, there was really no connection. And I'm not saying anything horrible happened to me. It just wasn't the connection to God that I needed. But that's okay because I have God now. That was it. I thought my way was going to be better, and it never was.
Never was. You always ended up falling backwards. So on the last breakdown that you really had that led you to finally getting into this position to make the decision that, I'm enough is enough. I'm going to break through right now and I am going to go in and I'm going to do this thing. How did that come about? How did you finally get there?
Well, a lot of pain and a lot of struggle and a lot of just whirlwinding, and I was a hurricane of the world and just destroying everything and everybody around me, hurting everybody around me, especially my loved ones. By that time, from the time I started taking those pills at age 36, Um, my sons were in high school and my youngest was 10. And now that whole time is just a blur. And I have one that's married with 2 children, two that are in school, or, living their lives. They're, in their 20s. Like, um, yeah, I think it was kind of that, but it was a do or die situation for me. I'd been to the hospital way too many times. I had way too many close calls. There was a third time in a hospital visit where I ended up having rhabdomyolysis, which is where all your muscle tissue breaks down and starts flooding your kidneys and your liver with blood. You die from it. I got that from exhaustion because I had been doing so many drugs. And that didn't even stop me. I still had 2 more hospital visits. Anyway, it was do or die. I was like, okay, this is not the person you were meant to be. Your marriage of 22 years is over because it pretty much was just done. My kids pretty much weren't talking to me. I mean, they were, but they didn't want anything to do with me. I hurt my mother. She worried all the time about me. And I didn't care. I can't imagine the worry I am a parent and I can't imagine that. Thought of it, one of them just, you never know when they're going to die. I had nowhere to go. I had absolutely nowhere to go. I was in rehab in Dallas, 3rd rehab in 4 years. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm exhausted. So I made a decision right then and there. Okay, you're not going to die. We know that. Like, you've been to the hospital 17,000 times. It's not working. You're alive. God needs you here.
Yes.
But yeah, I said, you know what? I'm going to write down who I want to be. Like, what kind of person and what kind of values and what kind of morals do I want other people to look at me and see? But not only that, but most importantly, when I look in the mirror, because I couldn't look in the mirror at myself anymore. And I wrote it all down, like, be a good father, be a good role model, be honest, finish what you start, feed your body healthy food, be kind, love people. And I think one of the most important ones on there was finish what you start, because in those 12 years, I started a lot of things that I never finished. That's actually my whole life, really. But I took it that seriously, and I said, I'm going to give Alcoholics Anonymous a try. Because at this point, I was an alcoholic on top of a drug addict. I had kicked the pills after the second recovery I was in, the second rehab I was in. But then alcohol took over. Mm. And I had never had a problem with drinking. I was a social drinker, but yeah. And so that was 3 years of being an alcoholic. And so I was like, how much bigger of a loser can you get? Like, I did not like myself, but I wanted to. And I said, I'm going to give AA a chance. I said, it's probably not going to work, but I'm going to give it 1 year. And if it doesn't work, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing, because that's all I know. And I can tell you, like, putting down that I was going to finish what I start really put something in me, and I can't even explain it. And, my sponsor was telling me to start praying, and I was like, oh, brother, here we go, but I did little bits at a time. And it was like just a little bit of gratitude, and I don't know if you want me to go into that or.
Yeah, I would love for you to share what finally changed between the first few times that you had gone into a support group, or whether it was narcotics or alcoholics. I would love to know what the difference was. What made it different? Why did it work this time, JT? Why did it work?
That the answer is easy, and it was a connection to God, period. Once I had that, I was like, wait a minute, that's what I've been missing my whole life. That's what I've been searching for. That's what I thought the drugs were giving me. It was God. And I felt him working in my life, and I felt him putting people in my life that I needed, because they were like characters in a story coming in. They each had something to help me, to guide me. And I'm like, that's no coincidence. That's God. So yeah, I mean, without that connection, I don't know if I'd be alive today.
Well, and we know that he's absolutely a cornerstone of those programs. AA,
Mm,
God is what makes AA
yeah.
work.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's why it always turned me off in the past. But they use the word higher power a lot. And that's what I had to start with, was I'm going to find a higher power. And I was in Southern California at the time, in a sober living house, and going through a program down there. And I'd go to the beach and I'd look at the ocean and I'd be like, that's my higher power. But eventually I'd go to the ocean and go, that's God. That's God. God made that. Like, that is a power greater than myself. And God has brought me here for a reason. And I did. I finished what I started.
It's so good. I mean, it's like you had such a dark space in your life, and where you are now, it's like, what lessons did you learn from that time period? Because I truly believe that things happen for us, not to us. And if we look at things the proper way, we can always find a lesson or something that we can grow from, that we can take from it, that can benefit ourselves, but can also benefit others. So what did you learn, JT? What did you learn in those times?
I would say one of the biggest things I learned was that despising myself, hating myself, was never a tool that was going to drive me to get better. That people love me unconditionally. That the only true people you have in your life in the end is your family, or the family that you create for yourself. And I learned that despite what I put people through, what I put my family through, that they were there supporting me the whole time, and I just didn't see it. I learned that that loving yourself is very difficult, but it's very necessary. That you can't get better for other people. That was probably the biggest lesson. You can't get better for your son. You can't get better for your mom. You can't get better for your job. You have to love yourself enough to do it for you. And that's selfish, and that's okay. That's the kind of selfish you need to be. And that's what I learned. Like, I am selfish in my recovery, Marcy. It comes first. It comes before my husband. It comes second. God comes first. It
Yes,
comes
there you go.
second. It comes second, before anything, before my job. And they're very understanding of that. They know when I need to leave and go to a meeting. But yeah, I learned that you have to do it for you,
Mhm.
nobody else, or it's not going to work. You can try all you want, but trust me, I know a lot of people who did the same thing, doing it for other people and not succeeding.
Okay, I love that. So, where are you at right now in your recovery? How far out are you?
I am coming up on a year next
Woohoo!
week. Yes, I can't believe it.
And
Yeah.
you're doing so great. And I mean, you've already got a sponsee. You already have someone
Yeah,
that you are mentoring and helping through this.
yeah.
So I would love to know, what is one thing that, if you could go back and tell yourself, just one thing, what nugget would you share with yourself, or what would you share with someone that is in that place now, like the place where you used to be?
Mm,
What would you tell them? What would you tell yourself?
that's a tough one, because there's a lot of things I would. And I have to remember the person I was. Is he going to believe me when I say this? But yeah, absolutely. I would say to somebody else, and I would say to myself, that God loves you. God loves you whether you're messing up or not, no matter what you're doing, no matter how bad your morals have got. You can't ever get to the point of no return with God. And if you just turn to him, everything will be okay.
Mhm.
I would love to share that with you.
That is just absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I think that is absolutely a message that everybody needs to know, that every single one of us is the son or daughter of the Most High King, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
he loves us no matter what, that our crowns may tilt and sometimes they may slip, even fall off, but he will always be right there to pick it up and to place it back on your head, because he loves you so much and he doesn't see the things that we do wrong.
Yeah.
He sees your potential, he believes in you, and he will always be there for you. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So Jerry, tell me then, so what are you doing now to be able to spread joy, to spread hope, and to be able to just really kind of uplift the world? Because you've got a great message. I mean, I love your
Yeah.
podcast. I'd love for you to share more about your podcast
Thank
too.
you. Yeah. I mean, just sharing at meetings, telling, giving inspiration and hope at meetings is key, because that is what I needed to hear when I was first in the rooms. Like, oh, look, he's been here a year and maybe I want what he has and I'm going to do what he's doing. So sharing at meetings. I have a sponsee who I am connecting to God, which makes me so excited for him. And yeah, my podcast is all about recovery. And my goal was just to help one person, even if it's one person. And I don't need to know that who I'm helping, because that's God. He's doing that. Like, he's guiding all that. So I don't need to know, but I love doing it. It's healing for me. I've had several people that have either text me or called me or emailed me and said, you said this and it changed my life, or your guest speaker said this and it changed the way I think. It's really rewarding, and it's like a different kind of rewarding that I have never had in my life, because it's reward without ego.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, ego is just edging God out.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely need to be watching our egos.
Yeah.
So tell us, what is the name of your podcast? Where can it be found? And how can people follow you?
Okay. Well, it's called Recovery and the Sober Truth. You can find it on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, basically any podcast platform that's out there. You can find it. Trust me, I've searched them all. And, I have a Facebook page. It's called The Sober Truth. It's not quite the full long one, but you can find me on Facebook. And yeah, I that's it. Yeah, that's how you can follow me. But yeah, just listen. I've got some great things coming up. I'm doing a 2-part episode on mental health.
Awesome.
And yeah, and its role in addiction. So it's going to be great.
Well, you're great. You're amazing. I appreciate
you
you so much, JT. Thank you for sharing your
welcome.
story. Because
Pleasure.
as you said just a moment ago, it's in the sharing of the stories. It's the stories that we're able to hear, the things that, and it's like when we were talking before we started this recording, and I said, just be as vulnerable as you feel like you possibly can, because it's in our vulnerability in sharing our stories that it will resonate with someone else in such a way that they'll be able to see themselves in your position and know that they too can take that next step towards whatever it is that they want.
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, JT.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Martin.
Oh, you guys, I hope that you were as blessed by this episode as I was, and I am. And again, the title of this is Your Pain Meds Have Taken Over Your Life. What now? And now you can see, I mean, what now is hope, it's joy. As a matter of fact, JT just got to spend the past week with his sons, his grandchildren, beautiful, beautiful grandchildren, with his
Yeah.
father, with his mother, with his family around him in such a way that he hasn't done for a really long time.
Present.
Beautiful.
Absolutely present. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening. And we cannot wait to see you again on the next episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. Take care.